Well, you know where I kind of am again. This is a 89 Cavalier 4-door sedan that probably was an RS. Might be an RS. You know, it's got a Z24 style grill, hood, which is unusual to see on these kind of cars. Or this one was taken off of a Z24. So whoever had this car once before had style. Oh yeah, that's how it ended in the junkyard. This thing took a punt from the rear. And also, I'm gonna just say this out straight to the J-body community. This car is considered to be a second generation, but it is, in truth, a first gen. Because of this rear suspension setup, every 1982 to 1994 Cavalier is all one generation because of this rear suspension geometry. They never changed the underpinnings of this car for those, 12 years of production. And in 95, they redone the rear suspension to be a twist beam McPherson strut suspension. Where else this is separate coil and shock. Pretty old school, but still, system is pretty trusty. It's just a different way of doing things. But yeah, this 1989 Cavalier is considered a first-gen Cavalier. There are only 2 generations of these cars ever made. Regardless of what you might think, they only made 2 generations. This one being the first. This is a third facelift for this car. And these Cavaliers always mean something special to me, even though I hated driving one when I was younger, and this thing's seen some action. But I always grew up in the back seat of a Cavalier. Then eventually, front passenger seat, even closes. Eventually being, in the driver's seat of a couple Cavaliers. And my family owned 5 of them. 2 sedans, 2 station wagons, and a coupe. We didn't own any convertibles. And, well, being in the back seat, back seat, front seat, driver's seat, gets me back some memories. So this is an 89, which is the same year as my dad's, except he had a 2-door. The amazing thing about this car is it is actually well optioned. Let's see. First of all, we've got power locks, which is unusual for a Cavalier. They rarely option these out in the 80s. By the early mid-90s, power locks are becoming a bit more commonplace on these cars, but in the 80s you seldomly see this. Power windows. This is a rare feature. I've never seen a J-body until now with power windows that was not a Cavalier convertible. So I find this kind of strange that this car got equipped with power windows, which I suspect this to be an RS, although a little bit of nerdism for you. In 89, they dropped the RS package as a trim. Well, actually, the trim RS was dropped altogether. But they still continued to use the RS as a package for the base standard Cavalier. There was a VL coupe. That was only in coupe only. You were given squat. Then you got your standard Cavaliers, and then your RS package, and then your Z24. While this car does have tilt steering wheel, which in 89 was actually quite a luxury feature that many people just didn't bother. But the door cards are actually nice and soft and fuzzy. They're not your typical plastic hardened door cards that you see on so many Cavaliers. My dad's was actually vinyl. He had a VL Cavalier that was a total stripper, like literally rubber carpets, vinyl seats, had a radio delete from the factory. Literally just a bare bones car. Passenger sun visor apparently was not standard on his car, so he had to buy a passenger one, which oddly enough just didn't exist on the VL. And this car has the optional passenger mirror. It's even got the optional center console. That's actually not even center console, it's just an armrest, which I've never seen these cars ever equipped with one. And of course the 3-speed automatic, which I would say about 60% of all Cavaliers had. There was a good chunk of them that still had manuals, but a lot of people optioned out them for automatics, which is pretty typical. Your rear defroster switch would be there, but obviously this person never optioned it out with it. And the RS package, you could also option the car out with full instrumentation, which this one doesn't. And, well, beyond that, this is just an ordinary car. You get not only just a dome light, but a map light. VL Coupes didn't have that. VL Coupes didn't have... It was this coat hanger, but you still had the left one. But you didn't get 2 coat hangers in the VL Coupe. This seating is absolutely lush for an 89. We had all vinyl seats, which meant... Oh, and rear folding split 60/40 rear seat. That's incredible. Well, actually, no, it's got a rear defroster, but where is that? Oh, no, actually, it's right here. So that's actually the rear defroster. So what was this switch? I don't even know. Power mirrors? Doubt it. Oh, even the key's in there. Even until 1990, the Cavalier still had a metal glove box door. Talk about GM putting one foot in the past and one foot into the future. That's just typical for them. And that's kind of about it. Yeah, my dad's was not a power steering car. It was a no AC car. Didn't even have the ashtray package or the smoker's package, which at this point we're becoming an optional one, like an optional for these Cavaliers by this point. But it's a well optioned out car. So my idea, because now I've been collecting radios, because I grew up with a lot of GM cars, and this is aftermarket, but typically those old Delco 2700 series radios, well, that's a common sight in my childhood, and I figure, hey, you know what, I think they're cool. I do like music, I like stereos, have a lot of my dad's old sound equipment from the 80s, so that kind of started off from that. But now I'm venturing into car audio, and specifically only just GM stuff, because really, that's just what I grew up with. It's not until really recently did the whole family started buying import cars, starting with my uncle buying his 84 Toyota Camry, although it was a used car back in the late 80s, but that was the family's first import car purchase. And ever since then, we've been gravitating more towards them. And now the only one that drives a GM car as a daily is my mom. She still drives a Buick. And my aunt has an 88 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Classic, one of the very last ones to get off the line in 1988. She owns one of those, which I might be driving down from up north in a few weeks, getting that prepped up for a new driver. And the last actual full traditional classic GM car that is still being that's still in ownership in my family is my Skylark. Beyond that, everyone's driving imported cars, which growing up we only drove GM. Now as we're getting older, we're not buying domestic anymore just because we just don't believe in them. It's actually a shame, because this is a time when these cars were... There's even a cassette holder right there, too. Look at that. Ooh. Does this thing come out? Nah, it doesn't come out. It's just... Oh. your e-brake is really on right now. In fact, it's excited. Oh yeah, look at that as I'm getting my hands dirty. Look at that. We stopped buying domestic just because they were getting more expensive, brand new, and when they got old, they were kind of becoming more unreliable. Just you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s cars that we used to grow up, or that I grew up in, kept driving, and the 90s was really the last decade in which we all bought GM cars that we absolutely enjoyed. But it wasn't until the 2000s did we really start finding lemons. We bought cars. Well, that don't work. I would say the last GM car that my family bought was I think a 2004 Buick Grand Prix, and that solid car just started over time. Started to collect issues and never really became I mean, it was a car for my brother, but beyond that it just didn't really do a whole lot much good for him. Now he drives a Honda Civic, so now he is again just people are moving away from GM cars in my family. I will continue to own the Skylark because it's a car I grew up with, it's a car that I enjoy, it's a car that I care about, and I will make sure that friendship continues, because between man and machine, that is one car that I absolutely enjoy the most. And that will always be in my garage at all times. What happens to the Oldsmobile, we don't know. What happens to my mom's Buick, being the last holdover in my family, how long that car will last. It's only at 46,000 miles, 2002 LeSabre, brand new. Bought it from a friend of the family whose mother, who was 97, and just didn't feel like driving anymore. Bought the car brand new, fully loaded up, minus, actually I think the car has leather seating, so it is a fully optioned out LeSabre. And she only put 36,000 miles between 2002 and 2017. She didn't really drive a whole that much. Car is in great shape, so honestly, this one Buick may last another 15 years before it finally falls apart. And then at that point, my mom, which at that point she'd be retired, she would have to think about buying a better used car by that point, or had she saved up the money, she could buy a much more newer car than she is expecting, that she thinks she could afford, but she could probably afford in that time. But just right now, she's pretty content with that. Just looking around, seeing this. Phenolic is another type of protoplastic. It's not plastic because it's an ashtray, so ordinary plastic would actually melt with cigarettes. Phenolic is a precursor alongside with Bakelite to modern day plastics. It's incredible that GM is still using phenolic, although for ashtrays it makes total sense, which actually this whole piece may end up being phenolic. Should be more hard wearing, like when the rest of this car is totally decomposed. Really, this piece may be the last plastic piece from this car to still continue, because this is hard wearing stuff. It's pretty hard. There's not enough give. You could shatter this, but its decomposition rate is so low in terms of heat and age and breakup. This stuff will not decay. The rest of the car will, just not this. So I just find that funny that it's just made out of phenolic, which the rest of this components, this whole car will decompose in time. It's just, yeah. I don't know, it's, someone was a smoker at one point. They did use a cigarette lighter. Sure, it's gonna pop out. There we go. This thing has air conditioning. 3-speed fan. Actually, no, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4-speed fan. The off switch is still on the vent the vent switch. Because you have a variation of 2 of these, where some of them are a 3-speed fan with an off switch on the fan speed for the blower motor, or on the vent control. So I see both types. I think only for air conditioning units, or for AC equipped cars, will it come with this style of switch. Non-AC cars will have none of this bullshit. The off switch would be part of the fan speed. Of course, you're hot. Oh boy. So, why am I in an 89 Cavalier? Well, as I mentioned before, I started collecting radios just recently. And, yeah, it would be fun to play around with radios, playing them in the room or somewhere. But I kind of want to find a good display in using a radio, which I'm not going to use this garbage because this is new. In fact, it's Alpine, but I wouldn't trust it to work. A CD player, I don't know, it just doesn't interest me. Only discovered recently that my family has like nearly close to 1,000 tape cassettes. Insane amount of tape cassettes, which I just boggles me. So the Cavalier is one of few GM cars, as far as I know, that has a radio surround that is part of the dashboard cluster from this time period. And in order to really display a car radio without showing, oh yeah, it's just running raw leads to a voltage supply, and, you know, there we go, you have radio, is I want to take this panel off, keep this panel with me, attempt to take out this dash cluster, which I don't have enough tools, because I don't have a wrench big enough for that, and I may have to come back another day to kind of unscrew the steering wheel out, destroy the steering column, which, unless I have fuck shit up tools, this instrument cluster will not come out with this piece on, or at least this piece on for sure. Because my plan is I want to make a wooden sound box to house radios that I can switch out from time to time, because I'm collecting different types. But also to dress up the radio and have a working display of both a radio and having an instrument cluster on while the radio is turned on. Literally just splicing power from the gauge lights and warning lights, because you may as well light up the whole dashboard. And just have fun with radios, and making a nice wooden carpeted covered stereo, I guess really sound box to listen to music while also admiring a car dashboard, which is hard enough to do because you often have to rip out the whole dashboard, which unless I find a different way of getting rid of this column, I'd have to take off the steering wheel off of it anyway. And I would rather find a full gauge package for the Cavalier of this gauge type, with voltage, oil pressure, temperature, and of course fuel level. But if anything, right now, I would just like to have one gauge cluster just to play around with for the wiring and such. Or unless I can find another one loose and about, and then take one clean clear plastic, I don't know, glass per se, quote unquote, and just make something fun out of it, because I'm kind of a crafty person. Because eventually, playing around with radios just in the raw, it'd be nice just to kind of dress them up just slightly. So it's kind of my plans. It's just I can get this piece off. Getting this thing out is a bitch. It's just 4 bolts, but it's gonna be a bitch. So it's just part of the plan. It's warm in these cars. And of course, trunk panel for the sedan was different than the coupe. So was the taillights. Taillights were one piece, whereas the coupes were two piece on each side. Just different uniqueness of GM cars for this time. Wow, look at that. That thing must have wow, that punch was so bad it started bending the metal and cracking the paint here. You have to wonder if this was just separate. But, oh. Beanie. Oof. Oh. I'll catch you guys later as this thing tries not to totally run me over, so catch you.